You've probably heard that old rule, right?
Right.
Like the one that says you have to wait 24 hours to report someone missing.
Oh, yeah. It's basically a staple of almost every television police drama from, like, the last 50 years.
Exactly. You know the exact scene, too. The frantic family runs into the precinct, and the world-weary detective just sighs, leans over the desk, and says, "Sorry, my hands are tied. Come back tomorrow."
Right, come back tomorrow. It makes for great TV, but it's incredibly dangerous.
It really is. And today, in this deep dive, we're going to show you exactly why that is a deadly myth.
So let's ground this in Albany, New York, March 2, 1998.
Right. Suzanne Lyall. She's a 19-year-old computer science major at the State University of New York at Albany. And the sources we have, they paint a very vivid picture of her.
They do. She was brilliant.
Yeah. She wasn't just like casually browsing the early internet. She built computers completely from scratch.
Which in 1998 was a big deal.
Exactly. And she loved the prog rock band Rush. And she was also just incredibly close with her family. Like she was emailing or calling her parents, Doug and Mary, almost every single day.
And that detail right there, that establishes a crucial behavioral baseline.
A behavioral baseline. Break that down for us.
Well, in the psychology of missing persons cases, an investigator's first job is establishing routine. You need to know what normal looks like. Any deviation from a strict, communicative routine, like a teenager who calls home every day, suddenly going silent, that is the primary indicator of an involuntary disappearance.
And her routine that Monday was completely standard. She took a midterm exam she'd been stressing over, she attended her classes, and then she headed to her part-time job at Babbage's.
Right, the software store.
Yeah, this busy local shopping center called Crossgates Mall. So she worked until the store closed at 9 p.m., hopped on a city transit bus, and was seen getting off at a campus bus stop known as Collins Circle around 9:45 p.m.
And it's a very short walk from that stop to her dorm.
Super short. But she never made it back to her room. When her boyfriend, Richard Condon, couldn't reach her the next morning, he alerted her parents, who immediately called the campus police.
And this is where the system completely failed them.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the initial police response is the catalyst for basically everything we are going to talk about today. So Doug and Mary Lyall tell the police, "Our daughter is missing. This isn't like her. She calls every day." And the police essentially brush them off.
They tell the parents not to panic.
Right. They say, "Oh, it's just a college student taking a brief, unexplained absence. It's like being stuck in a customer service waiting room when you are fully aware the building you're sitting in is on fire."
That's a great way to put it.
You are screaming for someone to bring a hose, and a clerk is politely telling you to just take a number and wait. I have to push back on the police logic here, though. Why are they so dismissive initially? Is it just sheer negligence, or is the system genuinely overwhelmed by college students who just, forget to call home?
What's fascinating here is the collision between statistical probability and investigative resource management. Police operate fundamentally on statistics.
Okay, statistics.
Yeah. The overwhelming statistical majority of 19-year-olds who don't come back to their dorms on a Monday night are simply out with friends, staying with a partner, or blowing off steam after a midterm.
Which makes sense on paper, I guess.
Right, because activating a full-scale search and rescue operation, processing a bus stop as a crime scene, pulling homicide detectives off active cases that requires a massive, immediate allocation of taxpayer resources. So historically, law enforcement relied on a buffer period.
That 24-hour waiting myth.
Exactly, to let the false alarms naturally resolve themselves.
But the fatal flaw in that statistical logic is that in the rare instances where it is a legitimate abduction, assuming a teenager is just blowing off steam means you are actively throwing away the most critical investigative window.
The most important hours of the case.
And the Lyall family lost that window, because while the police were waiting for Suzanne to miraculously walk through her dorm room door, the trail was going cold.
And we see that degradation of evidence almost immediately in the case files.
Exactly. The very next day after she vanished, someone used her debit card at a convenience store ATM a few miles from campus to withdraw exactly $20.
And they got the PN right.
Yes, the person entered her correct PN on the very first try. But the surveillance cameras only show the store's cash register, not the ATM. Police spent years trying to track down a man wearing a Nike hat who was seen in the store at the time.
The so-called Nike man.
Right, but when they finally found him, he was completely cleared.
Leaving that ATM withdrawal as a massive mechanical dead end. Because how did the person at the machine know the PN?
Well, her boyfriend, Richard Condon, knew it. And Suzanne's parents noted she almost always withdrew exactly $20. suggesting maybe she was forced to make the transaction under duress.
Which is terrifying.
It is. Now, Condon had an alibi. He was playing video games with a friend who corroborated the timeline. But his behavior later became a point of intense scrutiny. He eventually refused to take a polygraph test and just stopped cooperating with the investigation entirely.
Which, always raises eyebrows, even if it's legally his right.
Yeah, exactly. But here is the most heartbreaking loss of evidence, I think. Months later, police found Suzanne's Babbage's employee name tag in a parking lot situated in the opposite direction of her dorm, about 90 feet from the bus stop.
But the condition of it.
Yeah, because it had been sitting out in the upstate New York snow and rain for weeks, any potential fingerprints, DNA, or forensic evidence were completely washed away.
And that degraded name tag perfectly illustrates the catastrophic cost of administrative delay. I mean, time is the ultimate enemy of forensics.
It really is.
Witnesses' memories overwrite themselves. Suspects destroy clothes. DNA washes away in the rain. That completely lost initial window in the Lyall case is the precise reason the modern investigative playbook looks the way it does today.
Because early evidence like Suzanne's name tag was being lost to the wind, law enforcement across the country eventually had to physically rewrite their rule books. Like if you look at modern training manuals like the California POST guidelines, which stands for Peace Officer Standards and Training, it reads like a direct point-by-point response to the Lyall family's nightmare.
The current POST curriculum explicitly and forcefully targets what it labels the reporting myth.
Which is huge.
It mandates that law enforcement must accept a missing person report immediately. There is no 24-hour waiting period.
Wow.
Furthermore, they are required to take the report regardless of jurisdiction. If you walk into a precinct in Los Angeles to report your sister missing in San Francisco, that desk officer in LA has to take the report and immediately route it through the system. They cannot tell you to just drive to San Francisco.
And what blew my mind reading through these training materials is how deep the forensic protocols go into the actual biology of a search. For instance, the section on collecting scent articles for tracking dogs. Here's where it gets really interesting. The manual explicitly states you cannot just grab a dirty shirt from the family laundry hamper.
And there is a fascinating biological reason for that. We tend to think of scent as just a smell, right? Like perfume or cologne. But for a tracking dog, scent is particulate matter.
Wait, particulate matter, like physical stuff.
Exactly. Humans shed about 30,000 to 40,000 dead skin cells every single hour. We are constantly walking around in a microscopic snowstorm of our own biological material, mixed with sweat and volatile organic compounds.
A snowstorm of skin cells. That is wild. So if a police officer reaches into a laundry basket and grabs a t-shirt, they aren't just getting the missing person's skin cells.
Precisely. They are grabbing a blizzard of cross-contamination. They are pulling the skin rafts of the mother, the brother, the family dog, all mashed together. To a tracking dog, whose olfactory processing is thousands of times more sensitive than ours, that t-shirt smells like a chaotic crowd of people.
So it basically ruins the trail.
It renders the evidence useless. This is why the POST guidelines now mandate using a clean, sterile stick or a fresh glove to pick up an item.
Wow, not even touching it with their hands.
Right. Ideally an undergarment or a hat that hasn't been washed, and then placing it inside a breathable paper bag, not plastic, which can trap moisture and degrade the biological material with mold.
The manual is just relentless about removing human error. It also dictates the criteria for an Amber Alert, which are incredibly strict. The victim has to be under 18 or disabled, believed to be in imminent danger of serious bodily harm, and there must be an accurate description of the victim, the suspect, or a vehicle.
And that strictness is entirely intentional. The system relies on the public's attention. If police trigger an Amber Alert every time a teenager misses curfew, the public will develop alarm fatigue.
They'll just swipe it away on their phones.
Exactly. They will simply swipe the notification away and stop looking at the highway signs. The threshold is high so that when an alert does go out, millions of people instantly act as thousands of sets of eyes. Additionally, the manual standardizes DNA collection from family members, requiring it to be requested within 30 days of the disappearance to build a comparative profile in the national database.
But I want to make something very clear to you listening. Police departments didn't just wake up one morning, read a biology textbook, and decide to implement these perfect rules. They were forced to. Because Doug and Mary Lyall faced those agonizing delays, they refused to let another family experience that administrative nightmare.
They turned their grief into fierce activism.
They did. They started at the state level with the Campus Safety Act in New York, forcing colleges to have concrete investigation plans. But then they took the fight to the federal level, championing what became known as Suzanne's Law.
Suzanne's Law was a fundamental shift in infrastructure. It mandated that local police report missing persons up to the age of 21, raising the cap from 18 to the National Crime Information Center, or NCIC.
Can we pause and explain the NCIC really quick? Because it sounds like just another government acronym, but it's actually the central nervous system of modern policing.
That's a great way to describe it. The NCIC is a massive, centralized database accessible by almost every law enforcement agency in the country. Think of it as a digital tripwire.
A tripwire, okay.
Yeah. Before Suzanne's Law, if a 19-year-old went missing in New York and a highway patrol officer pulled her over in Ohio, that officer in Ohio would run her name and see absolutely nothing suspicious.
Because she was over 18.
Exactly. By mandating that 19, 20, and 21-year-olds be entered into the NCIC, the moment an officer anywhere in the country runs that name or license plate, the system instantly flags them as a missing person. It eliminated the "she's just an adult college student" loophole that hampered the search for Suzanne.
And in 2003, Suzanne's Law was officially signed into federal law. But, and this is where the legislative mechanics get wild, it wasn't passed as a standalone bill. It was bundled into a massive piece of legislation called the PROTECT Act.
Right, the PROTECT Act.
Yeah, which stands for Prosecutorial Remedies and Other Tools to End the Exploitation of Children Today. This act did undeniably crucial things. It established a national Amber Alert coordinator, and it completely eliminated the statute of limitations for child abduction. But because it was such a colossal bill, lawmakers packed it with other provisions.
It became an omnibus bill. In the American legislative process, an omnibus bill is a massive package that rolls numerous smaller bills into one single vote.
Right, but why do politicians do this?
Yeah.
Why not just vote on Suzanne's Law by itself?
Because of political leverage. A bill named after a missing college student that implements Amber Alerts is considered must-pass legislation. No politician wants to be on the record voting against protecting missing children.
That makes sense. It'd be political suicide.
Exactly. So lawmakers use that momentum like a train leaving the station. They attach their own, often more controversial measures to the train, knowing the whole package will pass.
And the most controversial passenger on that train was a provision called the Truth in Domain Names Act, which enacted incredibly strict obscenity laws targeting virtual or computer-generated pornography. Now, we aren't talking about physical harm to a real child here. Prior to this law, the Supreme Court had essentially ruled that if an image wasn't a photograph of a real, identifiable human victim, prosecutors had a very hard time charging someone, citing free speech protections.
Right, because there was no actual victim.
Lawmakers used the PROTECT Act to alter the legal definition of what counted as illegal material, sweeping up digital depictions and drawings.
Which created a massive legal shockwave regarding the First Amendment.
Exactly. It led directly to the prosecution of Christopher Handley, an American collector of Japanese manga, graphic novels. Handley wasn't accused of harming a human being. He was prosecuted under the PROTECT Act simply for possessing drawn fictional manga comics imported from Japan that federal prosecutors deemed legally obscene under the new law. He ultimately took a plea deal for 6 months in prison.
It was huge controversy.
And to be clear to you listening, we are impartially reporting the facts of this legal battle as they appear in the sources. We aren't taking a side on the First Amendment or obscenity laws. But I have to ask, doesn't bundling the real-world abduction of a college student with the prosecution of someone reading comic books completely distort the original intention of the Lyall family's fight?
It certainly complicates the legacy of the legislation, but if we connect this to the bigger picture of how our government functions, it illustrates the messy reality of systemic reform. A law born from a family's desperate, pure search for their daughter successfully forced police to take 19-year-olds seriously, saving countless lives. But simultaneously, because of how laws are bundled, it created a highly complex battleground over free speech that went all the way to the Supreme Court. The intention was pure. The vehicle used to pass it was politically incredibly complex.
It's just wild how one tragic night in Albany ripples out to alter the criminal justice system on a national scale. But here is the most sobering realization. Even with the NCIC pulsing with data, even with perfect scent article collection and the eradication of the 24-hour waiting period, the reality of missing persons investigations remains incredibly messy.
It really does.
You can legislate the perfect protocol, but people still vanish into thin air. We read through case reports of other unsolved disappearances in the capital region of New York, the exact same areas Suzanne disappeared from, and it proves how easily a case can still derail.
Because while the protocols optimize the response, they cannot control the sheer chaos of human behavior or random chance.
Take Suzanne's case itself. It remains unsolved today. There are chilling, modern true crime theories that she may have crossed paths with the infamous serial killer Israel Keyes.
Oh,
Yeah. Keyes traveled the country, burying kill kits to use on victims he chose entirely at random. After he was caught and died by suicide in 2012, investigators found he had actively Googled Suzanne Lyall's name, and he had a known signature of taking his victims' ATM cards and using them.
which lines up with the $20 withdrawal. It's a terrifying, plausible theory. But from an investigative standpoint, without a DNA match or definitive forensic proof, it remains just a theory.
And there are other ghosts in that region where the rules just couldn't save them. In 2004, a 17-year-old high school soccer player named Craig Freer walked away from a friend's apartment complex into a patch of woods and completely vanished. His mother suspects a secret phone call he received regarding his sexuality may have led him to a dangerous meetup.
But think about the Amber Alert criteria we discussed earlier.
Right. Because he was 17 and there was no immediate evidence of a suspect or a vehicle to suggest imminent abduction, the Amber Alert system didn't trigger. The rigid rules designed to protect the system actually kept it quiet in his first few hours.
Then there is the deeply complex case of Jaylik Rainwalker from 2007. Jaylik was a 12-year-old foster child diagnosed with reactive attachment disorder, living in a reportedly volatile situation with his adoptive parents.
In Jaylik's case, the immediate reporting mandate worked. Police were involved right away. But his adoptive father claimed Jaylik had run away to join a street gang and provided investigators with what he called a farewell note left by the boy.
But the people who had previously provided respite care for Jaylik came forward and revealed that the note wasn't a goodbye letter at all. It was actually just a school homework assignment regarding a book character that the father had made Jaylik write days earlier.
Which completely poisons the context of the early investigation.
Derails everything.
And then there's Kelishu Akernacht, a 35-year-old Rite Aid shift supervisor who left work late one night in 2008. A few hours later, her car was found completely engulfed in flames near a local rail trail. She has never been seen again. When I look at these cases, each one has this bizarre, highly cinematic detail. A burning car, a homework assignment framed as a suicide note, a man in a Nike hat at an ATM. It's like trying to solve a jigsaw puzzle where half the pieces belong to three entirely different boxes. Every time you think you have a piece that fits, it just forces the whole picture further out of alignment.
And this raises an important question regarding modern investigations and our true crime culture. The psychological urge to connect the dots, to definitively declare Israel Keyes took Suzanne, or to construct a whole narrative around a burning car is overwhelmingly strong.
Yeah, we all want resolution.
But as consumers of these stories, critical thinking is essential. We must separate hard, court-admissible forensic evidence from internet rumor. Law enforcement is bound by what can be proven. In a world completely overloaded with armchair detectives on Reddit, keeping the focus on actual provable data is harder but more necessary than ever.
So, what does this all mean for you? We've explored a deeply tragic diagnostic landscape of missing persons. We've seen how the chaotic reality of someone vanishing may never result in a neat, clean resolution. There are ghosts in the woods and burning cars that remain stubbornly unexplained. But the incredible legacy of Suzanne Lyall and the tireless decades-long fight of her parents, Doug and Mary, is the undeniable proof that the system can be forced to adapt.
Exactly.
The deadly 24-hour waiting myth has been eradicated.
And that is the most crucial practical takeaway for you listening today. Understanding these protocols is a literal form of protection. Knowing the biology of how scent articles must be collected with a clean stick to prevent cross-contamination. Knowing that law enforcement must take a missing persons report immediately, without delay, regardless of what city or state you live in.
It gives you the power.
This knowledge empowers you. If the unthinkable ever happens to someone you love, you don't have to sit in that customer service waiting room hoping someone eventually helps. You know the exact rules, and you can demand immediate, protocol-driven action from minute one.
It's about taking control back when the world spins violently out of your grasp.